Picture this. You're a little girl. You live in a world filled with bright colors, stuffed animals, and people who promise to love and protect you. Your bedroom is your safe haven, a canopy bed with a warm, fuzzy blanket, maybe a nightlight that projects stars onto the ceiling. Each morning you bounce out of bed excited for whatever the day may bring. The trip to the park, a new cartoon on TV, the smell of pancakes drifting through the kitchen. You trust your parents implicitly because they're the ones who hug you when you cry, laugh when you're silly, and tuck you in at night, whispering that tomorrow will be even better. You don't question if they're telling the truth. You don't doubt their love. In your innocent eyes, the world is as pure as you are, and you never imagined that that trust could be broken. That's the image many people thought of when they first saw photos of Caylee Anthony. A small child with big, bright eyes and an unmistakable innocence. But behind those eyes was a tragic story that would soon captivate the entire nation. Caylee Anthony was born on March 19, 1986, to Sydney and George Anthony in Warren, Ohio. The family eventually settled in Orlando, Florida, where Caylee spent most of her life. George Anthony was a former law enforcement officer and security guard. Cindy Anthony worked as a registered nurse. From the outside, the Anthonys were a middle-class suburban family leading an average American life. George and Cindy had 2 children, Caylee and her older brother, Lee. They were typical parents, proud of their children's accomplishments, supportive of their goals, and eager to maintain a close-knit family bond. However, behind closed doors, the Anthony household, like many, had its own darkness. Cindy was often described as strong-willed and outspoken as Caylee transitioned into adulthood. Disagreements about finances and personal responsibilities arose, creating a growing friction throughout the home. Caylee Marie Anthony was born on August 9, 2005, when Caylee was 19 years old. Despite initial confusion regarding the paternity of Caylee continued to live in her parents' home, where Cindy assumed an active role in Caylee's upbringing. Friends and family described Caylee as a joyous, playful toddler who quickly captured everyone's heart. Cindy embraced grandmotherhood, and there were times she even stepped in as a parental figure for Caylee, particularly when Caylee struggled with the responsibilities of young motherhood. Some acquaintances claimed that Caylee would leave the house for days, allegedly enjoying Orlando's nightlife, while Cindy cared for Caylee. There were early signs that Caylee had a desire for fabrication. For instance, Caylee claimed she had graduated from high school, when in fact she was a few credits short. Later, she claimed to be employed at Universal Studios for over 2 years. When questioned by her mother, Caylee made elaborate stories about her work life. These falsehoods would take on a new and more sinister aspect in the wake of Caylee's disappearance. Despite the tensions, the Anthonys continued living under one roof. Financial and emotional pressures weighed on the family, but neither George nor Cindy could predict the tragic events that would unfold in the summer of 2008. June 16, 2008. This was the last day Caylee was reliably seen alive by her grandparents. According to the official family account, on the morning of June 16th, Caylee left the home with Caylee, purportedly to spend time together. During the following weeks, friends of Caylee reported seeing her at various nightclubs in Orlando, engaging in typical party activities. Caylee's parents, however, had not physically seen Caylee. Whenever Cindy asked to see Caylee gave a variety of excuses. She was with a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, often referred to as Zanny. She was at theme parks, or she was staying with friends. By mid-July, Cindy Anthony had grown suspicious and increasingly alarmed at not seeing her granddaughter for nearly a month. She tracked down Caylee at her then-boyfriend Tony Lazzaro's apartment in Orlando. Caylee was nowhere to be found. On July 15, 2008, Cindy Anthony called 911, stating that her granddaughter had been missing for 31 days, and that Caylee's car smelled as if there was a dead body inside it. This phone call, released to the media, would become one of the pivotal pieces of public evidence. Sydney also mentioned that Casey's explanations made little sense, and that she had effectively kidnapped her own child by withholding information about Caylee's whereabouts. During initial questioning by law enforcement, Casey insisted Caylee had been kidnapped by the nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, on June 9, 2008. However, almost every verifiable detail in Casey's story failed to hold up under scrutiny. The nanny's apartment turned out to be empty. The building manager had no record of such a person renting there. Investigators also discovered that Casey never worked at Universal Studios. She even took police officers on a tour of the Universal Studios building, wandering the hallways until she was forced to admit she had lied about her employment there. Casey's behavior further fueled suspicions. Rather than exhibit the anxious, frantic attitude expected of a parent searching for a missing child, she appeared calm and nonchalant. Her friends even recalled that Casey had been out dancing and partying in the days after Caylee went allegedly missing, getting a tattoo on her back that read Bella Vita, meaning beautiful life during that time. On July 16, 2008, Caylee Anthony was arrested and charged with giving false statements, child neglect, and obstruction of a criminal investigation. On August 21, 2008, she was released on bail but was soon rearrested on new charges of theft and forgery after she allegedly stole checks from a friend. During this initial phase, investigators were desperately searching for Caylee, hoping to find her alive. Yet the suspicion was already mounting that Caylee's disappearance had a more tragic outcome. One of the most significant pieces of evidence involved Casey's 1998 Pontiac Sunfire. Both Sydney and George Anthony had reported a foul smell emanating from the trunk. In July 2008, George retrieved the car from a tow yard. He immediately noticed a smell he was familiar with from his time as a police officer, what he believed to be the odor of human decomposition. A forensic examination of the vehicle found traces of a substance consistent with human decomposition in the trunk. In addition, air sample tests performed by Dr. Arpad Foss of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory indicated the presence of chemical compounds associated with the early stages of decay. While this type of evidence was largely new and somewhat controversial, it was compelling enough to shape public perception that Caylee was dead. Investigators discovered a strand of hair in the trunk that displayed death banding, a characteristic marker that sometimes appears on hair when it's attached to a decomposing body. Later forensic testing indicated that the hair was microscopically similar to Caylee's. Although microscopic hair comparison is not considered 100% definitive in court, prosecutors pointed to it as evidence Caylee's body had been in the trunk. Cadaver dogs trained to pick up the scent of human remains alerted to Casey's trunk as well as to a spot in the Anthony family's backyard. This further suggested that at some point a deceased body may have been in contact with those areas. Duct tape found near Caylee's remains would later become one of the central pieces of evidence at trial. The brand and specific features of that tape would be significant because similar tape was found in the Anthony home. Some investigators, and later the prosecution, contended that the duct tape was placed over Caylee's mouth and nose. Though the exact manner and timing of its application were heavily debated, investigators searched the Anthony home computer, discovering various suspicious search terms including chloroform, neck-breaking, and household weapons. While these searches were a focal point of the prosecution, the defense would later challenge the reliability of the data, as well as who in the house had actually typed those terms. On December 11, 2008, a utility worker named Roy Kronk found skeletal remains in a wooded area near the Anthony home. Kronk had previously reported seeing something suspicious at that location months earlier, but it was dismissed at the time. Once discovered, it was soon confirmed through DNA testing that the remains belonged to Caylee Anthony. The remains were severely decomposed, which made it difficult to pinpoint the exact cause of death. Caylee's bones were scattered around the area, possibly due to animal activity and environmental factors. A small patch of duct tape was found attached to parts of the skull, fueling the theory that Caylee had been murdered. A laundry bag and a Winnie the Pooh blanket were also found at the scene, objects that connected directly back to items from the Anthony home. With the remains officially identified, the investigation shifted fully into a homicide probe. Caylee Anthony was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. The question looming over the nation's collective conscience was, did Caylee Anthony kill her daughter, or was something else at play? Prosecutors argued that Caylee Anthony had planned to kill Caylee to escape the burdens of motherhood and to maintain her carefree lifestyle. They pointed to her month-long bout of partying while her daughter was ostensibly missing, the lies about her job, and her stories about the nanny. The prosecution proposed that Caylee had researched chloroform as a way to sedate Caylee before suffocating her with duct tape. One of the critical pieces of the prosecution's case was the reportedly high levels of chloroform found in the trunk of Caylee's car. The state claimed she might have used chloroform to knock Caylee unconscious. The internet search history, how to make chloroform, along with neck breaking, was used to underscore their argument of premeditation. The chemical analysis, however, was complex and not as definitive as the prosecutors might have liked. Chloroform can occur in small amounts as part of decomposition, and the reliability of the specific testing methods came under scrutiny. Jeff Aston, one of the prosecuting attorneys, argued that the duct tape was placed over Caylee's mouth and nose, effectively suffocating her. The presence of duct tape on or near the skull was crucial for the state's argument of murder rather than accidental death. The brand of duct tape found at the scene reportedly matched tape at the Anthony home. Prosecutors also focused on Caylee's behavior after Caylee's disappearance. Her frequent partying, her getting the Bella Vita tattoo, and a lie she told her family and law enforcement. They believe this behavior indicated a lack of remorse or concern, implying that Caylee's death was deliberate. They stressed that a loving mother would have been distraught, cooperating fully with authorities and showing signs of grief, rather than going out to nightclubs. By charging Caylee with first-degree murder, prosecutors sought either the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole. Florida is one of the states that allows capital punishment. The burden of proof for first-degree murder is especially high. Prosecutors must establish that the defendant intended to kill the victim with premeditation. Caylee Anthony's lead defense attorney, Jose Baez, presented a radically different narrative. In the opening statements, Baez shocked the courtroom with an allegation that Caylee Anthony died in an accidental drowning in the family pool on June 16, 2008. According to Baez, George Anthony had discovered Caylee's body and orchestrated a cover-up to protect Caylee and himself. Baez also made allegations of sexual abuse, claiming that George Anthony had molested Caylee from a young age, which explained her habitual lying and her dissociative behavior. George vehemently denied these allegations. No direct evidence supported the claim of incest, but it played into the defense's attempt to explain Caylee's odd behavior and her reluctance to come forward with the truth. The defense argued that Caylee accidentally drowned in the family pool. Panicked, Caylee and George supposedly decided to hide Caylee's body, placing duct tape on her corpse to make the death look like a kidnapping. This theory accounted for the duct tape but lacked a concrete explanation for the month-long deception in Caylee's bizarre activities post-June 16th. The defense attacked the forensic evidence as either inconclusive or overly reliant on novel scientific methods. They highlighted flaws in the air sample tests that suggested chloroform in decomposition, noting that these tests were relatively new and not universally accepted within the forensic science community. Furthermore, the alleged internet searches for chloroform on the Anthony home computer became a topic of contention when new evidence surfaced that they might have been performed at times Caylee was unlikely to be home. Jose Baez and his team worked to dismantle the prosecution's portrayal of Caylee as a party girl murderess. They emphasized that her behavior could be explained by a history of abuse and a dysfunctional family dynamic. They also questioned the logic of using first-degree murder as a charge, arguing that there was no indisputable proof that Caylee had planned to kill her daughter. The Caylee Anthony trial became a media spectacle. rivaling the O.J. Simpson trial in terms of public fascination. Cable news channels like CNN, HLN, and Fox News dedicated round-the-clock coverage to this case. Television personalities like Nancy Grace famously branded Caylee as the most hated woman in America and declared that justice was needed for Caylee. Public opinion overwhelmingly leaned towards Caylee's guilt, with the 911 call referencing the smell of a dead body in the trunk, the photos of Caylee partying while Caylee was missing, and the unverified nanny story. Many felt the evidence was more than enough to convict her. Social media platforms erupted with theories, condemnations, and emotional pleas, marking one of the earliest times in legal history where online communities deeply influenced and mirrored courtroom proceedings. Selecting a jury for such a high-profile case was exceptionally challenging. Due to the widespread media coverage, finding jurors who had not formed an opinion proved difficult. Ultimately, the court decided to select jurors from Pinellas County, Florida, and sequester them in Orange County for the duration of the trial. This process took weeks and involved extensive questioning about potential jurors' knowledge of the case and their willingness to impose the death penalty if warranted. During the opening statement, the prosecution painted Caylee as a liar who murdered her daughter to live a carefree life. On the other hand, the defense claimed Caylee died accidentally and alleged a family conspiracy to cover up the truth fueled by a history of abuse. The key witness testimonies of George and Caylee Anthony were complex. Caylee testified that she had made certain internet searches on chloroform, attempting to take the blame off Caylee. George disputed any involvement in Caylee's death and denied the abuse allegations. Their contrasting stories highlighted their familial strife. Tony Lazaro, Caylee's then-boyfriend, testified about Caylee's demeanor in the period Caylee was missing, offering observations that she did not appear distraught. Throughout the trial, there were multiple heated exchanges between the prosecution and defense teams. Judge Belvin Perry had to intervene several times to maintain order. The defense's bombshell accusations about sexual abuse created a tense atmosphere, and the media provided near-instant coverage of every raised voice, objection, and piece of evidence introduced. In their closing arguments, the prosecution implored the jury to consider the evidence of Caylee's web of lies, the decomposition in her car, and her suspicious search history as proof of a deliberate homicide. The defense urged jurors to see the forensic evidence as inconclusive and stressed the lack of a concrete cause of death. They hammered home the narrative that the state had not definitively proven how Caylee died or that Caylee was responsible. After hearing 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 11 hours. Their relatively quick decision sent shockwaves through the public. People were expecting a drawn-out deliberation given the complexities of the case and the gravity of the charges. The jury found Caylee Anthony not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and aggravated child abuse. She was found guilty on 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. Caylee was sentenced for 4 years but received credit for time served and was released on July 17, 2011. The verdict sparked widespread outrage. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse chanting for justice for Caylee. The media vortex, which had largely presumed her guilt, labeled the trial outcome as a miscarriage of justice. Many compared the shocking acquittal to the O.J. Simpson case, where the evidence seemed overwhelmingly against the defendant, but the jury still returned a not guilty verdict. Legal analysts suggested that the prosecution may have overreached by seeking the death penalty and focusing so heavily on first-degree murder. Without a clear cause of death or a smoking gun, the jury may have found it difficult to convict on such severe charges. The defense team effectively cast enough reasonable doubt about the forensic evidence in the timeline, thus persuading the jury to acquit on the most serious counts. Following her release, Caylee Anthony went into seclusion. She faced threats, public scorn, and struggled to find normalcy. Some reports indicate she moved between private residences and filed for bankruptcy in 2013, citing around $800,000 in liabilities. She has occasionally surfaced in media interviews, though she remains a polarizing figure. Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, the real woman by that name, sued Caylee for defamation, arguing her life was upended by Caylee's false nanny story. Although this case garnered media attention, it did not result in a significant judgment against Casey because there was not enough evidence directly linking this Ada to the fictional nanny claims. The search and rescue organization Texas EquiSearch sought more than $100,000 in costs from Casey, arguing that if she knew Caylee was dead, she wasted their time and resources. A settlement was eventually reached. George and Cindy Anthony's relationship with Casey remains strained. Cindy has at times publicly said that she still loves her daughter, while George has expressed feeling betrayed by Casey's allegations against him. Family unity has not been restored, and the events surrounding the trial left indelible marks on all involved. The Caylee Anthony saga has been the subject of numerous TV specials, documentaries, and books. Casey participated in the limited docuseries where she again maintained her innocence, reiterating the claims that she had been sexually abused and that Caylee's death was an accident. Outrage over the verdict prompted calls for legislative changes. Several states proposed versions of Caylee's law, which would make it a felony for a parent or guardian to fail to report a missing child in a timely manner. These laws aim to prevent future cases where parents do not alert authorities to a child's disappearance for an extended period. Caylee Anthony became a symbol of what many perceived as the ultimate maternal betrayal. Her partying, tattoos, and apparent indifference painted a portrait that many Americans found reprehensible. The discussion surrounding the case transcended the legal realm, delving into societal expectations of motherhood, mental health, and family dysfunction. At its core, the Caylee Anthony case is a tragic narrative. A young mother, her toddler daughter who vanished without explanation, and a family grappling with secrets and lies. The case escalated from a missing persons investigation into one of the most watched murder trials in American history. For many, the image of a smiling Caylee is haunting. She's perpetually the little girl frozen in time, a life extinguished far too soon, with few answers as to why. Caylee Anthony's acquittal has been interpreted as a failure of the justice system by some, and a testament to its core principles by others. In retrospect, the case highlights profound themes of family dysfunction, the power of circumstantial evidence, and the tension between legal standards and public sentiment. While the narrative continues to generate discussions and sensational theories, one indisputable tragedy remains. A little girl lost her life, and the full truth behind her death may never be known. Yet, in the rush of sensationalism and legal maneuvering, it is crucial to remember Caylee Marie Anthony as more than just a case file or a headline, but a child whose short life served as a catalyst for national reflection on justice, parenthood, and accountability.